Love seeing all the smiling faces in the new intro. Welcome in, everybody. I'm Tyler Pyburn from 5 Tool Productions. This right here is Create Smarter. Thank you so much for joining us on the 1st of July. Yes, a new month in the summer. Yes, we just wrapped up. Actually, yesterday had a wonderful outing with the entire 5 Tool team. Got a chance to hang out together and enjoy the sun. But really, that was all about celebrating another month that was in terms of video production, because we had a great month of virtual productions, a little bit of hybrid mixed in, and of course, on-site shoots. So with all that in mind, we figured we might as well, give you a look back at what happened in the month of June. Love it, love it, love it. A lot of interesting jobs that we had this past month, honestly. Some of the things that I actually found really interesting is the fact that we're going back on site more, and we'll see a little bit more of some on-site shoots coming up in just a few minutes. But what we also want to do, today's episode, is really all about looking back at some of the things that we've done over the course of not just the last month, but the last several months, really. And one of the events that we've actually been able to put on was with a school called the Lakeside School. They're up in Seattle, Washington, in that region. They've actually cooled off a little bit finally, so happy for them, because when we spoke to them, it was about 115 degrees, but things have cooled off, but the conversation was still pretty hot. So we wanted to kind of bring that to you right now and show you what it was like working with us, working with them, and how the virtual event went for them a few months back.
Hey everyone, welcome in. Joined today by Samantha and John Paul from the Lakeside School. Hey guys, how are you doing today?
Good. How are you?
So I know from a fundraising perspective, well, from everyone's perspective, things were a little insane, at the start of COVID last year. So Samantha, I'm curious, when COVID hit, what changed for you? What were the biggest things that you had to shift or adjust right off the bat, and how did that carry through this past academic year?
So it was a lot of personal outreach at the end of last fiscal year, and then we used 5 Tool when we needed to do our note writing breakfast, which I had never been to one, so I didn't know what that looked like, but John Paul had, and we had to do that virtually. So I think just kind of that was the beginning of looking into new opportunities. And then we also used platforms like ThankView and used video a lot. We were able just kind of to throw everything to the side, and being new, we didn't know any different.
And luckily, we have a really amazing team that trusts us and kind of leaned on us to look for new ways, innovative ways to get the word out and connect and keep people engaged. And I think that what we did with the Lakeside Fund, with you all producing it, was exactly what we needed to do. And because of the success of it from last year, we're planning on moving forward with it, regardless of where we are in the world, pandemic wise, or any of that. We saw it as a way to engage with people that wouldn't have been able to engage, and so that's a great something or other that happened because of the pandemic that we're going to keep with moving forward.
As you look ahead, and you mentioned, thankfully, we're starting to see things open back up and we'll have in-person events again. What types of ways are you thinking about trying to reach those people who are either spread out geographically or maybe just don't have the time or inclination to come visit you guys in person?
The pandemic kind of opened our eyes to the sort of necessity to keep these sort of virtual events around post-pandemic, because it's been an incredible way to connect with people who don't live here. But for people that live here, there's still this, sense of, um, desire to be in person, and we're looking for every way possible we can do that next year. But some of the things that are going to stick around, for example, our Parent and Guardian Association, they hold monthly meetings, where any parent can come and attend. Since we went virtual with those, it was amazing to see how many more. I mean, it's probably 300% improvement kind of thing, as far as the attendance to those events virtually. So because of that, they're going to keep those meetings virtual.
You mentioned the Lakeside Fund again, Samantha. You all were the hosts of that event, so you got to sit in that chair and kind of be the live MCs and hosts and kind of see that play out from a production standpoint. What was your experience like with that?
Yeah, well, I will say first and foremost, I was so thankful for Five Tools' help with that, because when it was starting, John Paul's microphone was not working, and we are panicking. John Paul can't get it to work. I'm panicking on the other end, and Phil's completely calm and it's gonna be fine.
What Five Tool did for us, beyond helping us just produce a really great event, I mean, it looked, on the technical side of things, it was just a really polished event, and that it was really important to us. And that was our main motivation for working with a production company, as opposed to trying to do it ourselves, sloppily getting through it. We were really most interested in the production value that Five Tool would offer. It's absolutely worth the investment, and I think people were just like, whoa, how did you do that? What's going on? And we were excited to share what we did with friends, with other schools, and with colleagues, so that they could look to use the same sort of production value. Yeah, I definitely am excited to just see how these hybrid events can continue and be successful, and be something that we can kind of keep around, because I think they benefit so many more people, and connect, and they allow us to kind of connect so much better.
Samantha, John Paul, congrats on the success despite all the challenges, and best of luck in the upcoming fiscal. Enjoy those lunches. That sounds great. Making me think maybe we should have more office lunches at the Five Tool offices. And thank you so much for your time, and best of luck in the coming year.
Thank you. Thanks for all your support.
If Phil's buying, I'm all for office lunches. No, good stuff indeed. Really want to say thank you to them for taking time out to sit down and have that interview with us, because it's always good to know, what went well, what didn't go well, what can we improve upon. But one of the common threads we've seen when we have kind of these conversations with a lot of the clients is the need to keep the virtual going. And the reason for it is to kind of continue to reach the people that they wouldn't have been able to in the past. The in-person events are great, and we love them. We've been a part of them for years, honestly. But the fact that we can continue to reach people virtually with the live stream is something that we'll want to make sure that folks continue to do and see that benefit, really, because you want to be able to touch those people and reach those people that you couldn't have before, which is really important. But anyways, moving on, we want to go ahead and show you some more behind the scenes content today. And one thing that's been really interesting is the fact that we have been able to go on location a lot more as of late, with restrictions opening up. One of those we've been able to go, locations that we've been able to go to a handful of times over the course of the last couple of months is Spalding Rehabilitation in Charlestown. And this most recent one, we were able to have really just a great conversation with former New England Patriot Teddy Bruschi and his wife about his time at Spalding, and really, how he's kind of become part of the family over the course of the last almost 15 years. So with that, here's the behind the scenes of our interview with Teddy Bruschi. It's a shoot day. We are at Spalding once again today. We've got a pretty awesome interview. We're talking with Teddy Bruschi and his wife Heidi about kind of their experience at Spalding. Should be a really fun interview. Of course, we're sports fans here at Five Tools, so we've got to love that. But Teddy's in the house. We're going to be sitting down to do the interview with him and a few other folks from Spalding, and we'll give you a little tour of how it went. really cool. I'm watching on Facebook right now as well, just seeing people tune in, which is always cool to see. Now, one of the things I wanted to kind of make mention with that, we actually have been able to be on location with Spalding again since then. So on our next episode of Create Smart, we'll have the behind the scenes of another wonderful story at Spalding with Ethan Wang and his family about kind of his recovery mission. Just an inspiring and an incredible story that we'll share coming up probably on the next episode of Create Smarter. Maybe. Or the one after that. But it will be here soon enough. Anyway, so we're going to move on, and now it's time. One of the things that we like to do here on Create Smarter is kind of get to the news, to kind of break things down as to what's going on in the world of marketing, video, content marketing, production as a whole. So let's take a look at the news.
Hi there, folks, and welcome to this week's installment of Create Smarter News. I'm your host, Josh, and this week I am joined by some of my, dare I say, favorite coworkers here at 5tool. I know that was a question we did in our Respond Smarter earlier today. It's been a busy day for content creation, but I'd like to welcome in Phil and Marisa. I'm pointing even though you're all on a flat screen with me. But yeah, thanks so much for joining us, and we're going to just talk about some awesome headlines from this week.
Let's do it.
Yeah, and I think we'll start things off with me, so nice seeing you all, but back to just Josh's soapbox here. So this week I wanted to talk about something that is pretty interesting for those folks who do a lot of streaming and, call us Stream Central over here at 5tool. But Microsoft, a little company you might have heard of, they just had their Windows 11 unveiling last week. And, there was a lot of stuff that was pretty cool. We can talk about some of those things. But one thing that was a little unusual was their actual stream of the, we were talking about most likely pre-recorded press conference. They were streaming it from the Microsoft's own website. They were streaming it natively using their kind of Azure cloud platform. A lot of neat stuff with the video player, actually. But the stream wasn't working. And, that's kind of wild. Microsoft, they own the platform that they're streaming from. They're a multi-billion, if not, who knows, multi-whatever dollar tech company. And they still run into basic streaming issues, just like the little guys. So wanted to bring on Phil just to sort of get Phil's take on that. Phil, why is streaming so tough? Why can't the geniuses over at Microsoft do it like anyone else?
I personally love when stuff like this happens because it's great for us to point to and be like, hey, this is not an easy thing to do. It's difficult, it's complicated, it's tricky, and sometimes we'll work on a specific platform and something goes wrong and we'll say, hey, we'll talk to our representative over at whatever platform it is we're streaming to, but they're in charge of it. In this case, so they can only point the thumb, not the finger, and it's ultimately in all likelihood directing people to their site is probably a bandwidth thing, right? It's probably overloaded, and it's probably one of the most watched streams on their own internal live streaming platform, if I had to guess, because it's a huge product release. And looking at this article, Josh, I think it looked like the simulcast to Facebook that Microsoft was running to their own Facebook page worked well, and then of course there was some third-party partners who were streaming the event as well to YouTube, and that continued to work. But Microsoft maybe not super interested in Google, getting the views and the pub for their big product announcement.
Right? Yeah. No. Apparently, they'd rather have Newegg get all of those views. I believe he is a tech advisor to Microsoft CEO. He tweeted out the link.
You can buy all the Microsoft gear you want on Newegg. So, I guess that's kind of good for them. Better than a direct competitor anyway.
But yeah, he tweeted out the link to Newegg's version of the stream. Like you mentioned, it was also going on Facebook and on Twitter. But it's kind of a shame that the Microsoft video player itself wasn't working, not only because, hey, they want to look good, but Phil, I don't know if you've been clicking through sort of the features on this video player. It's available now for on demand. There are a pretty wide variety of different language options for the closed captioning. And there's also something I've never seen before. It's just a little icon of two hands. Looks like it's signing something in sign language. It's just a quick little toggle button, American Sign Language offer on, and it just adds a ASL interpreter over on the right side of the screen for the entire conference. Microsoft,
That's really cool.
They've been trying a lot of this accessibility, sort of baking it into their streams and announcements. They had their Xbox E3 conference a few weeks ago, and I sat on actually a Xbox accessibility panel from our friends over at 3Play Media. They talked a lot about how they go through kind of a lot of effort to get all of these different languages supported. So, hats off to the team, but it is a bit unfortunate maybe that not all of those features were available right at launch.
Yeah, listen, I think ultimately, though, there was other places for people to watch, right? And we talk a lot with our clients about redundancy. And sure, the stream wasn't up on their website, but if you're interested in the live stream, there was places you could watch it, right? It was on their Facebook page. There were third-party partners like Newegg who, had access to the live stream as well. You mentioned the tech advisor to the CEO tweeted out Newegg's live stream. So that's, there was other places people could watch. And sure, not ideal, but, one of the rules of live TV and live streaming is that what can go wrong will go wrong. And whether it's inside your control or outside your control, one thing you can control is having backups. And they did, at least in this case. So there were still places for people to go see it. And those accessibility things you mentioned, those are huge. And that's the hard stuff, right? The stream itself, that's kind of baseline, and that's where you should start from. But that accessibility stuff is next level. And, those are cool features. You're right. It kind of stinks that those will get brushed under the rug now. But longer term, that's some really great stuff for them to have baked into their streaming platform for sure.
Definitely. And not going to get into all of what Windows announced at their press conference. If you want to check it out, it's totally available online. But one big change to the Windows UI, they're going with a lot of rounded corners. Looks a little nicer. And Phil, that's something that we're working on with our graphics internally here this summer, right?
Yeah, and it's interesting when you think about like how much do little design choices impact your life when it's something like Windows. If you spend your entire day, your entire work day on Windows machines, if it's a little bit more pleasing to the eye and it's a little bit allows you to be a little bit more efficient day in and day out, that's a huge change. You don't necessarily think about how much an operating system matters in your life, but I guess it really does. So yeah, we're trying to make some updates and some little aesthetic jumps in our own graphics, and those are just for 30-minute, 60-minute broadcasts. Never mind something you spend 40 plus hours a week staring at if you're working in a Windows interface. So, I'm sure there will be tons of things for people to complain about, because whenever something changes, there's a million things for people to complain about. But cool to see them prioritizing things like accessibility and just user experience design as part of the things that are kind of at the forefront here for sure.
Definitely. Well, Phil, thanks for talking about Windows with me. I'm sure you and we could probably talk about operating systems for a couple hours here, but Windows 11, it's coming.
Aren't we cool?
Pretty cool. It's coming later this fall in October. I was talking with Jason this morning. It's actually going to come as a free update to anyone who already owns Windows 10. So some good stuff there. And yeah, that's about all I have. But now I'd like to bring back in Marisa. Marisa, thanks for joining us here on the news program.
Of course.
I know you tend to enjoy being behind the camera a little bit more than in front of the camera, but we just hooked up our new NDI Create Smarter Wall camera, so figured we'd get you in front of that and show off the new equipment and hear about some social media news. Is that right?
Yes, so I read this article that is reflecting on a paper that was written by a peer-reviewed journal, and they talked all about how we should treat social media similarly to how we treat the climate change crisis and how it's on the same level of urgency. They make the argument that, it's kind of amplifies misinformation and kind of spreads fake news, and the loudest people on social media get attention, which can be pretty dangerous for people that don't really know how to decipher what's real from what's fake. So I thought that was a pretty intense claim that we should treat it with the same urgency. So I wanted to bring Phil in to ask him what he thinks about this, because social media is kind of my job here. That's a big part of my job. So kind of comparing that issue to being like the climate change crisis is kind of a big allegation.
Well, I don't know that they're saying necessarily that social media in and of itself is as bad as a climate crisis, but the way it gets used, it's pretty serious stuff. And when you think about even things like, okay, so Facebook is ubiquitous. It's a lot of people's only source of news. So it's a lot of people's primary connection to the world beyond their family and their coworkers. And when you think about the fact that a couple of social media platforms, whether or not you agree with the decision to ban people from it, that's a really important decision, because that might be the only way that people get heard in today's world, right? So you can talk about banning people like President Trump after he's out of office, and there's good reasons for it. President Trump, accused of inciting an insurrection through social media, another thing we need to talk about. What social media is responsible for. But then once that person's banned, the question is, who should be making the decisions about who can reach, people en masse? And I think it's really important, it shouldn't necessarily be one person, one tech CEO who gets to make those giant decisions. And then the question is, from a regulation standpoint, who should be making those decisions? Because when the tech giants have been in front of Congress, it's clear that a lot of members of Congress aren't really super clear on what's going on. So I don't think we're saying social media inherently is, as dangerous as the climate crisis. I think it's the things that come out of it. But I think the question is, should there be any regulation? I personally think there should be, but I don't really know how you go about doing it. It's a huge question, and it's happened so fast comparatively that it's been really hard, I think, for lawmakers to wrap their heads around. Is it the end of the world, Marisa? I don't know. You tell me. Is social media going to be the end of the world as we know it?
I don't think so. I think that's a little intense. I agree with you. There needs to be some sort of regulation, but then again, who regulates what gets posted? Because the article did point out that social media does give disenfranchised people that have been disenfranchised in the past the voice to be heard, like you were saying. Like that is some ways to be heard that other people wouldn't get. So now it's just a matter of, how do we regulate that? And then I think there also needs to be a part of education where, on the flip side of things, people that are viewing certain social media posts, or even before they post things, need to be better about understanding how to decipher what's fake from what's real, and kind of being media literate and understanding how social media works and having that education piece from that side. But then again, that begs the question, how do we do that? How do we bake that education into the process of learning what social media is and the dangers of it?
Yeah, and I think that's a great point. I think in an ideal world, people would have great critical thinking skills, and they'd be able to say, just because I saw it posted on Facebook and it looks official doesn't necessarily mean it's real. Unfortunately, that's definitely not the point that we're at right now. And I think ultimately it's like, access to something like Facebook is something where if you're not on it, everybody in the world is on social media, and it's. If you're not on it, you're not connected to your neighbors, to the world. You're not getting information the same way that people around you are. So I think it's a huge question of who should be making decisions around this. And at least if you say it's elected officials, at least people have had a say in who's making these decisions compared to someone who just happened to develop this platform, like Mark Zuckerberg, who's done obviously a great job, made a ton of money, but his goal is to run a business and make a lot of money. His goal, no matter how charitable and nice he may be as a person, his goal running Facebook is not to provide a public utility. His goal is to make a lot of money. They sell a lot of advertising. They make decisions based on the bottom line. And so ultimately, when you talk about are bad things happening because of activity on social networks like Facebook, well, you look back at the CEO and they might look at their quarterly stockholders call and say, well, the numbers are up, so we're not as worried about it. Whereas elected officials have a responsibility to people to try to treat it a little bit differently. So I don't think it's necessarily even fair or right to leave it in the hands of CEOs who are, whose goal is to make as much money as possible with these companies, to say, oh, you're also responsible for the public good. Those two things are not always, hand in hand with one another, unfortunately.
It's a lot to put on the shoulders of one person, and I know I do not like making decisions, so I don't know where we stand with that. But this is a slippery slope. We could talk about this forever, so I am going to hand it back to Josh. Thank you, Phil, for joining us to talk about this social media and climate crisis conversation.
Absolutely.
Awesome. Well, hey, Marisa, we are streaming currently live right now on Facebook, either for Create Smarter News or part of our Create Smarter show, which, this is a whole pre-tape. It's coming up. Maybe we'll cut this part out. Who knows? But in terms of just things going on Facebook and being possibly helpful, possibly not helpful, we hope this has been one of the good ones. We can't talk about the impacts of social media usage while we're actively contributing to it right now. But I'll leave you with that sort of ethical conundrum here on the end of our Create Smarter News segment. Phil, Marisa, thank you both so much for joining and talking social media and Windows with me. Thank you, Connor, for pressing all those buttons in the back, making us look real good. And we'll be back next week for another Create Smarter News. So thanks so much for watching. We'll see you next time.
I don't know what is about that ding. Every time I hear it, I feel like my TV's being turned on right now. And that's what's happening. You're turning me on coming out of that segment now. Good stuff. Phil, Josh, Marisa, really good conversation. Loved kind of listening in on that and being kind of a fly on the wall to observe. So with that in mind, we are going to wrap up the show. But before we go, we want to wish you a very happy 4th of July weekend. Be safe. Enjoy it. We got to enjoy it a little bit ourselves yesterday. And while we didn't want to take too much video, let's be serious. No one wants to see this. But while we did get to enjoy it, we did take a video of that. We do have another fun outing with the 5-tool team. Just a couple of weeks ago, yes, they went mini golfing. And there was only one person that could be victorious. I'll leave that up to you to decide who it was. And, well, she might just tell you anyways. But that'll do it for us here in Create Smarter. Have a wonderful 4th of July weekend.
Welcome to behind the scenes of our mini golf trip. We'll see who wins.
I smell lavender. I think I'm having a stroke.